Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee meeting for May 1st, 2018. Welcome. We're here to have a listening session to hear your views on criminal justice in Whatcom County. Before we show our video, I'm going to have Holly just give a brief introduction. She's our facilitator tonight on where the restrooms are and everything. I think everybody probably knows, but you want to go ahead and say a few words, and then we will kick it off.
Okay, there we go. Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. My name is Holly O'Neill, and I'm going to be the facilitator for tonight. And as Barry had just said, the restrooms, if you're not familiar with the building, are right around the corner. So if at any point you want to get up and just stretch your legs, that's fine. This will be a fairly informal session. We will have people come up to the microphone and speak. We have it on video, and I'll give you more instructions when we get closer on. But I just really want to thank everyone for coming, and I especially want to thank our council members, Buchanan and Sapal and Bird, because they created this whole thing so that we could have an open public dialogue about these issues that are really important to our community. So I really want to, let's give them a hand for their just being here. That's great. Okay, so y'all ready? Let's start. We're going to watch the video first, and then I'll explain the rest.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barry Buchanan, Chair of the Whatcom County Council's Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, and I want to welcome you to the 2018 listening tour. We're reaching out to residents of Whatcom County to get your thoughts on our criminal justice system. Tonight, we will present an overview of where we are today and a timeline of events leading up to now. However, the main focus of tonight's meeting is to gather your input, so let's get started. The Whatcom County Jail was built in 1949 and until 1983 was located on the 6th floor of the county courthouse. In the early 80s, the State Jail Commission funded construction of the current correctional facility located next to the courthouse in downtown Bellingham, and the jail was completed and occupied in 1984. Over the next 2 decades, the county took numerous steps to enhance its criminal justice system, including creation of a jail alternatives program, establishment of a law and justice council, establishment of a blue ribbon panel on criminal justice and public safety needs, establishment of a drug court, expansion of the jail alternatives program and facility to include more beds and divert more offenders from full custody, adoption of an ordinance imposing 0.1% sales tax for criminal justice purposes, and passage of a voter-approved sales tax increase of 0.1% with part of the funding proposed for a new jail project and part for construction and operation of a temporary interim minimum security work center. In 2006, the Minimum Security Interim Work Center opened and planning for a new jail began in earnest. Over the next few years, money was appropriated to fund a jail site selection process, facilities planning, and preparation of studies necessary to locate a new jail in Whatcom County. A jail planning task force was formed, and the hard work of this group resulted in recommendations for tangible next steps in development of a new jail proposal. In January of 2013, the county purchased approximately 40 acres on LaBounty Road in Ferndale as the proposed site for a new jail, and in the fall of 2014, Council approved a contract with DLR Group for design and engineering services. The Council approved a recommendation for the county executive to move forward with jail planning by hiring a professional jail planner and identifying parcels of land that could support siting of a horizontally designed jail. In 2015, the Council established the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force to study ways to prevent and reduce incarceration in Whatcom County. That same month, the Council approved a resolution to place a measure on the general election ballot for 0.2% sales tax increase to fund a new jail at the LaBounty Road site. In November 2015, Whatcom County voters rejected the ballot measure. Over the next 2 years, the county secured a jail facilities use agreement with other Whatcom County jurisdictions, and the County Council held a public hearing to gather citizen input on jail size. The Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force worked diligently to prepare recommendations for safely and effectively reducing incarceration of individuals struggling with mental illness and chemical dependency, and also to minimize jail utilization by pretrial defendants who can safely be released. In July 2017, the County Council adopted an ordinance to place another measure on the general election ballot for 0.2% sales tax increase to fund costs associated with financing, construction, maintenance, and operation of jail facilities and incarceration prevention programs, including medical and behavioral health facilities and programs. In November of 2017, Whatcom County voters rejected the ballot measure. So, that brings us to where we are today. The County Council formed this committee to ensure thorough study and review of criminal justice and public safety. Our first priority is to reach out to the community and give citizens the chance to provide input and ideas for enhancing public safety and criminal justice in Whatcom County. Our process going forward will be to compile the data from these listening sessions and work with the Incarceration, Prevention, and Reduction Task Force to begin Phase 2, a needs assessment. The needs assessment will address who should be in our jail, where the jail should be located, a capital and operating budget, and what is the right size jail for Whatcom County. Once the needs assessment is complete, we will begin Phase 3, which is the facility planning process. The committee appreciates you coming out tonight and sharing your views with us about criminal justice in Whatcom County.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start. First off, I just want to introduce my colleagues, Marty Solomon and Genevieve, and they're going to be helping us tonight. Marty's going to be taking notes, and Genevieve is going to help with everybody to remember what 3 minutes looks like. That's her special job. So this is the third of 8 listening sessions that we're doing in the county. So we've done one in Deming and then one in Linden, so you're number 3. And the purpose of these listening sessions is to really have an opportunity for people to share their thoughts and feelings about what should be done in terms of our criminal justice system and public safety, and in particular to deepen our understanding of when we think about a jail, really what is the best solution. So that little preamble that you heard gives you some of the background. I was just talking to Genevieve that, you know, having that video on the website would also be good at some point. So, because I saw some people like taking notes as fast as they could, and you know, this will be available. And so, just to let you know, our intention is to just make sure that we can get all the information out there so that people can make good decisions. There's 2 pieces of paper that I hope you picked up when you came in. One is a survey, so in addition to speaking tonight, it would be wonderful if you could fill that out if you haven't already filled one out. So I see some familiar faces here, so if you've already done one survey, you don't need to do another. And then the other one is an FAQ that we've just started to put together. Just listening to what people's questions have been and trying to make sure that we're providing the information that will be helpful. So on the bottom of the survey, if you can think of other things, you're like, oh, we should have that as an FAQ. If you could write those down, that would be super helpful, because that's part of what we're trying to figure out is like, what information do people need? So I'm going to go through some ground rules and then some framing questions that I think will be helpful. The questions, which are right next to Barry. I'm sort of thinking of a Vanna White moment here, Barry, but I won't put you through it. There we go. I always date myself when I say Vanna White, but I think everybody here, you remember Vanna? You remember? Yeah, okay. So here's some framing questions that might be helpful. And these are just to sort of inspire your thinking, and also because what we've found now in the course of these 3 sessions is that these questions are helping us dig deeper. So the first one, what were your concerns about the previous jail proposal? if you had concerns. Or if you loved it, you can share why. What are your hopes for a better solution? What are the results we are looking for? And what would be a vision of success? And this really came up in the session in Linden, is like, okay, so at the end of the day, what is it that we want the result to be? Because that should inform our choices. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, what information do you think our community needs in order to make a good decision? So you can just put those as guides, but really we're here to listen to whatever you have that you feel is important to say. So in terms of ground rules, I'm going to ask that people, when they're ready to speak, they come on up here to the podium and speak into the microphone. You don't need to, there's not that many of us here, so I don't really think you need to stand in line, right? There's plenty of time, so get up when you're ready to speak. We'll take 3 minutes each, and as I said, Genevieve will give you a little time so you can kind of gauge yourself. I really want to stress that there's no wrong answers here. Like, whatever you have come to say tonight is what you've come to say. And at the same time, I am going to ask that you stay on topic and also that you maintain courtesy. So for us to be able to really hear each other, it's important that we really uphold this, this civil dialogue of courtesy and respect. All right? Got that? Okay. So, is there anything I'm forgetting that we need to remember here? Maybe I just want to mention that in addition to, these are all being recorded because we're in a public meeting. But one of the things that Marty and I will be doing is creating a final report where we're really listening for some common themes, and that will, when we're done with the 8 listening sessions, those will be up on the website, and then you can also comment on that. I did remember one last thing. Okay, if you have been to one or more listening session, I have a special request, which is that maybe you let other people talk, okay? Because we adore you. It's great to hear your comments, but we really want to make sure that all voices are heard. So especially if you have thoughts that you haven't had a chance to speak, that's great, but mostly if we can get folks who have not yet had an opportunity. Okay? All right, so are we ready? So the floor is open, so come on up when you're ready. Who wants to start? Thank you, sir. And again, if you could state your name and then just share whatever you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I'm the first comment.
And can you say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
My name's Paul Campbell, and I live in Bellingham. This is a pretty complex topic, pretty hard to talk about 3 minutes. But the design documents that are associated with the prison noted a big flat remote design, and you referred to the big flat model. And it cites the Department of Justice and National Institute of Corrections. Apparently, the document says that direct connection to the jail is the most important factor. And they note that operational expenses of prison transport from a remote location will soon outstrip the higher capital cost of a vertical jail. I don't understand why the decision was made to go immediately to that design. And I just don't get the need to put this jail in Ferndale on 40 acres unless there is another plan that hasn't been shared with the public. It seems burdensome for families, attorneys, healthcare providers to have to travel out there. And if we look out, as a lot of these forecasts do, to 2048, can you imagine what the traffic density is going to be like on I-5 by then? I'm very pleased with the work of the Incarceration Task Force and the collaboration with Vera, and also finding the alternatives to incarceration, such as the trauma center. And the city of Bellingham has taken the initiative to reduce some of their jail population, and I'm hopeful that soon we will as well. If we need a new jail, in spite of those activities underway, Let's find a funding vehicle that doesn't impoverish the county and denies us the ability to spend in the future on education, roads, water, sewer, parks, and business development. There seems to be one underlying problem, or an underlying problem, with developing accurate statistics on the jail population, particularly with respect to the Division Street facility. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned design and location. Were you 30?
I think that and I certainly haven't seen the work that went in that resulted in your decision to use the flat design. But as I say, there's documentations written by the Department of Justice and the National Institute of Corrections that provide guidance to building jails. And they say a direct connection to the jail is the most important factor.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, who's next? Yeah, please, come on up. You can do it. You got this.
Hi, my name's Bob Johnston. I live in Bellingham. My questions have to do with a couple points of departure that concern me, and I'll fess up right from the beginning. I'm interested in issues of social justice. I have looked at the Vera Institute report. In fact, when it came out, that was kind of my first engagement with the process you're involved in, and I sat in on their presentation to the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force in November when they formally submitted their report. I'm wondering, I've got about 3 questions and I'll just list them here. I'm wondering why County Council or the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force didn't look into reducing incarceration and getting this report from the Vera Institute, for example, earlier in the process. Secondly, the Vera Institute report includes, among a lot of other things, information about incarceration broken down by race, ethnicity, gender, and the numbers show a real disproportionate representation by people of color, African American, Native American, and Hispanic. And I'm interested in knowing what discussion County Council and Task Force has engaged in on that aspect of the information reported by the Vera Institute. I also didn't bring my copy in my notes, but I do remember another few things, one of which really impressed me, that it's not uncommon for people who are detained on a weekend out in the county to be arraigned and enter a plea before they ever get legal counsel. That struck me as really interesting, and I'd be interested in knowing what, comment, thoughts have come out about that. I guess my last thought is having recently finished a book by a legal scholar named Michelle Alexander, who's currently a professor at Ohio State in their law department, titled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Era of Colorblindness. I'm so heavily persuaded by the argument there that I want to ask you what discussion has taken place about alternatives not only to incarceration but also to sentencing and creating a criminal record for minor drug offenders, which is kind of the center of that book's argument. Okay, that's it. Thank you for all the work you do on this.
All right, thank you. Come on up.
My name is Bobby Burr, and I'm from the Barclay area of Bellingham. I have no prepared remarks, but turning to the fourth question there, what information do you think our community needs to make a good decision? I would say to you, you already have it, that you are guilty of analysis paralysis and you need to do something. I've been in the process of preparing questionnaires for candidates for various offices, including county council and prosecuting attorney. And what I'm going to say is reflective of that questionnaire. First of all, the problem with the Ferndale facility was mainly twofold. One, its location. We know the logistic problems of connecting it with a court. There was a lot of paranoid theories that the county seat would be moved to Ferndale in a property that had room for it. Our legal system is based here in Bellingham, and we need a facility here in Bellingham. I have proposed halfway facetiously that the waterfront would be a hell of a place to locate a new jail. I think it could be a first-rate jail located there. I think we need much stronger diversion efforts, both for mental health and for drug users. I think there's been some progress made, but I think there needs to be much more. One item that is not mentioned that I consider to be very important is to join the 90% of the counties in the state that have an independent corrections department rather than relying on the sheriffs. The sheriffs do not do a good job in the jail. I've been there 2 times, and they have this presumption that people they arrest are guilty, and they treat them that way even though they haven't been accused. We obviously need to abolish pretrial custody for misdemeanors. We need to substitute home monitoring for even those convicted if they do not pose a threat. These are things that are obvious. I'm very happy that the community is gelling around the idea of criminal justice reform, because right now, I think we have a criminal injustice system.
Thank you, Bobby.
My name is Joy Gilfillan. I'm president of the Restorative Community Coalition. And frankly, I'm offended, deeply offended. There is a presumption that we must build a new jail that is obvious in this entire campaign. That presumption that we must build a new jail has been obvious since 2010, when I first started learning about the art of incarceration and the privateering of the jail industry. When I started as a citizen to look into this issue, I trusted the bureaucracy. I trusted the politicians. I trusted the facts that our sheriffs, our executive branch, our authorities gave us. I trusted everybody. I am naive then. I am no longer naive, and this is a farce. I'm sorry, I did not intend to say that when I came here. I intended to come here and compliment you on actually, for the first time, listening to taxpayers. And you're not doing that. You are again assuming that you must build a new jail. You have not discussed tax reform. You have not discussed jail reform. You are not discussing incarceration and justice system reform. I doubt that any of you have gone and read all the objections that hundreds of people in this county delivered through the environmental impact statement to the jail industry contractors, who completely denied that any of the issues that we brought forward were dealt with. They denied that they were relevant, they were denied that they were within the scope, and yet this county is directly, and this jail is directly in the scope of taxpayers' concerns because we must pay for it. The Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force has done terrific work. Thank you, Barry, for supporting that. Thank you, Paul, for supporting the creating of that. The Vera Institute has delivered incredible statistics and recommendations based upon flawed statistics given by our own county executive and staff. We have no needs assessment. We have never had one, and that has been refuted by the executive branch. But if you actually look at the needs assessment that he calls one, it is not a needs assessment. We are completely out of bounds. We need to be talking, and believe me, I'm not saying this because I like to be contrary. I'm saying this because it's bad business to incarcerate citizens for weeks and months before they've been convicted. It is false to create mental illness and then charge people. It is false to build poverty and grow it without even considering alternatives. I'll be back.
Thank you, Joy.
My name is Lloyd Zimmerman. I'm from 2234 Main Street, Ferndale. And I've been following this for, again, about 7 years or so. And my background for this purposes is in mental health care. I've got an undergraduate degree in psychology, and then I have a master's degree in neuroreflexology when it comes to digestive issues. But then I've went on further, and I've got into wellness kinesiology. And this is muscle testing. And what I have found is an incredible tool that you don't hear about because it's so out there. But what it does for people's mental health is absolutely incredible. I've worked on over 150 people, and with some amazing results because you're changing the belief systems. And what you're actually doing is you're going in there and you're talking with the body and its innate self, and you're raising the frequency of vibrations of how they feel. And a lot of that is going down deep and going back to past trauma with the 3 T's I like to talk about here. And what we do is of the trauma, the toxins, and the thoughts. And those 3 things, if not properly addressed, they get like a 3-way tumbler. People, they get detoxed and they go out and the trauma comes back and haunts them and they have these thoughts and it's just a mess. So a new way is needed. So it's not, maybe you've heard me talk about the form and function of what's going on here. We just don't need a bigger jail. We need a better, more clarified function that really takes 21st century science of this psychoneuroimmunology and let's see what it does. This is information that I think the community needs to know to make a good decision. So the idea of kind of a triage point, when we find somebody on the street that's, they're cold, they're hungry, they're not on their medication, all that kind of stuff, we need a better way of dealing with them and when it comes to an emergency situation. So what I'm proposing is I like Bob's idea of somewhere on some port property. Let's create a park. Let's do some things that are very, very nice looking. It doesn't have to be a big building, have some different ideas, but combine it with other functions and so that people are down there. Because you also have a population of runaway youth. You've got people that do their medications. You've got people that without jobs that came up here. I grew up in Blaine, so when they hit the border and the water, they're here and they get stuck. And so they've got some really basic human needs that need to be attended to. So I think, and what really kind of motivated me to be here tonight, believe it or not, I listened to, it was Everett Everlasting. He posted one of your final comments here about a month ago or so, right before Easter. And what I felt by listening to you guys is that each and every one of you had an empathy to want to solve the problem. And then there was also the gratitude that you were moving toward it. And what I think is that with the right additions to this, we can peel off a large percentage of that jail population, give them better mental health treatment, and then we'll move to kindness, and we'll be really, I think, a bellwether city who's attacking, I think, one of America's largest problems, and that's incarceration. Thank you very much for your service.
Great, thanks, Lloyd. Who's next? Someone who hasn't spoken yet? Yeah, please, let's wait till and see if we can get, because I think you've spoken already. Let's see if we can get, yeah, here, come on up.
Hannah, I'm from the Columbia neighborhood, and just so far, I don't really want to tell you very much. I just want to ask, maybe all three of you could quickly address the people here and tell us what you're thinking.
We have intentionally created this as a listening session for us, so we're sorry. I mean, that'll be coming down the road where there'll be information presented in other meetings, but we really want to focus on hearing what the public thinks, the direction that this county needs to go. So it's really important, kind of that focus for this meeting. But thank you. Absolutely, that's what we're here for. We want to hear ideas from the public.
Thanks.
I'm Laurel Cook. I'm a citizen of Bellingham. Thanks so much for your work. This is a related issue. I don't know if you have any authority over this, but it seems like it's all part of the complex problem. As far as I know, and I did some research this afternoon, there is no clinic in Whatcom County that provides methadone for heroin addicts. The closest that I could find, the closest clinic is in Arlington. And if you're an addict and you need to get to methadone daily, that's an impossible task. And I think if you're an addict and you don't have resources like methadone, you are much more likely to fall into a life of crime to support your habit. So it's just another side issue of this very, very complex problem, and thanks so much for your work.
Thank you, Lauren. Someone else who hasn't spoken yet? Any of you? Would you like to speak?
I'm Cliff Langley. Before last week, I wasn't really considering coming here. I wasn't real concerned about what was going on, but I got a call from a inmate out at the work center. I want to give you a little bit of history. I went to work for the Whatcom County Sheriff's Department, the jail, in 1984. I was the last person that was hired in the jail that was on the 6th floor before we moved into the new jail. So I worked there for 4 years. Then in 1989, I went to work as a deputy sheriff on the patrol. And I've had a lot of dealings. I've probably come from a little bit different perspective than most people because I've been there, I've worked with these guys. So I got a call from a guy that I had arrested in 2006. Went to prison, got out of prison after a couple of years, got married, was on a really good track. Called me up one day and he said, I just wanted to let you know that you're the reason that my life is different. I got a call from him last week. He's back in jail. Had some trauma in his life and didn't know how to deal with it. Ended up getting back in the drug world and that kind of thing. But the thing that got me going was trying to get through all the hoops just to be able to talk with him. And I know that the jail staff, they need more people. The prosecutor's office needs more people. The public defenders needs more people. They need to be able to, when I first worked in the jail, in the winter, if one of the homeless people was hungry and cold, they'd go and have a meal at a restaurant and then not pay for it and get arrested, so they could come into the jail and get something to eat and get, warm, that kind of thing. Well, the people that are in the jail now, there's bad people out there, and they need to be incarcerated. They needed to be taken out of society, and that's what the jail is there for. And so where that's located in Ferndale, the technology takes care of a lot of the issues you're talking about. Right now, most of the people that go and visit, they visit over intercom and and attorneys. They use the phone and they have video. So having it out in the Ferndale, I don't think that's an issue. It's just something that people want to complain about. Hope for the better solution is the system needs to be in place that can work faster. Some of these guys sit in jail for a long time and they don't need to be. And so you need some way to speed that up. I guess my time is up, so. If you have any questions anytime, I'm available.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else who hasn't spoken yet in a previous session? Because I'm seeing a couple of folks who look eager to speak again. Okay, and let's just bear in mind, everybody has a right to their perspective and their opinion. We have different, that's part of how this works. We have different worldviews, we have different perspectives, and every time I listen, I feel like I learn a different piece of the puzzle of how to perceive this situation. So if we can just really remember, that's the point of why we're here. So anybody else who hasn't been to a previous session who'd like to speak? Okay, so then I'm going to open the floor to folks then who have been to a previous session who'd like to share again. You want to go? Sir? Yeah.
John Campbell. Concerns about the previous jail proposal. I think one of the concerns that the community, the taxpayers need to know about is what the costs of these capital facilities are going to be, and we have to look at not only the initial cost construction of this facility, but we have to look at the operating costs. The previous jail proposal, we were looking at $230,000 per bed with an overall operating cost of 30 years, real close to $1 billion. 900 million something, I believe. One of you council people came up with the math on that. And I think that's pretty important that we know what we're paying for here and whether we have a feasible revenue income to actually do that. And we as taxpayers don't end up bankrupt on something that doesn't get paid for. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John.
Hi, I'm Mark Pearson. I live here in Bellingham. And I was at the Linden listening session and made a couple of comments. Most everything that's been said makes tons of sense to me. I just wanted to add one thing. I actually want to congratulate you because it isn't spoken about in these settings so far, but the GRACE program is quite amazing. I mean, some people know that I was a hospital administrator here for a while, and we built a complex mathematical model of healthcare at the community level. And what we can show, and it's being used all over the country, is the single most important thing to fix the medical system is care coordination. And so you guys have, one way or another, come to the same conclusion and started building and funding a way to coordinate the multifaceted social and medical needs of the people that keep hitting the system and getting readmitted, as we would say in healthcare. I really think that's an amazing thing. As I read the documentation on the GRACE program and talk to people, I'm concerned that you don't have a sustainable funding, and that a lot of the way it's been created is to only take care of the biggest problem, and there are more people who need care than you can afford. So I just want to put out there on public record that there actually is a mechanism that we could as a county use to fund this perpetually. It's RCW 7044, and unfortunately in the documentation it's called a hospital district, but it actually doesn't require that you have anything to do with hospitals. It basically is a health district, a taxing district, and you can use that to be as precise and surgical as you want to for funding this. And I think these are the most needy people in this community. So I would love to see us seriously look into this form of managing the expenses. You've built a nice program, but as we all know, who are paying attention to it, funding is equivocal. This is a permanent way to fund it. Thanks. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, who's next?
Good evening again, Mike Kaufman, and I've been kind of following all this, of course, and you gave a handout last time up in Linden, and one of the interesting things that stuck out to me was when you were working with the numbers, the recession came along, there was a 5% hit or some hit on the amount of money, and that the money was all projected on a 5% annual increase in revenue. And the one thing that I learned in the recession was that the banking models and all the models that led to a big part of the default was that none of the computer models had any negativeness brought into them. They were all like, we're going this way. We're going to have all these increases. So when I look at the $97 million that you wanted to spend on the new one, it didn't seem to be, was there any recession? Was there any downgrowth that would happen, and what would happen to that number as we moved forward with it? So the increase in the computer modeling and growth seemed to be way out of line with what you're trying to do. The new jail that we built over on Division Street keeps being referred to as the new jail, but we're going to get rid of that. Yet there's no numbers in there that say, well, we spent $10 million or whatever out of this money that we spent on it. How much are we actually going to get return if we sell that piece of property? When I look at the numbers in this, we were looking to build a 521-bed jail. We have 150 beds out in Division Street. That brings it down to 400 needed. So then we take out that there's 65% of the need right now seems to be felonies in the numbers. So if we pull out the 35% that aren't felonies, that's another 140 minus, so we're down to 260 bed need, keeping the jail that we already own and paid for. I was talking with my mother the other day, and we talked about throwaway society and how Cleveland was going to try and do better. And Mr. Burr spoke about, or another gentleman, about the Jim Crow in a book that he was reading. And today in the news report was about Washington State. There's something like they estimate 13,000 people that are in need of health care, medical, all the different things, mental health and stuff that we talked about, that they are eligible for help, but the state isn't funding it. So if the state can't fund $13,000 worth of medical needs, we're constantly dealing with a group of society that we as privileged people are throwing away and saying that we want these other things. And in my heart, I am tired of my tax money enabling the system to do this type of thing to my community. And until what would be a vision of success for me would be that, I said this before, and we know it, that we spend twice as much on many things in this country as anybody and get the worst results. So a vision of success would need to be, what are they doing in Scandinavia? What are their per capita incarceration per person? And in Europe and places that are doing that much better job, and let's look at those numbers. And our vision would be to bring our society down to those numbers and fund those people that need help first. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Somebody else who hasn't spoken yet tonight? Did you want to speak? I thought I saw you get up earlier. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for providing another evening to listen. I think too many people who run for office maybe occupy chairs.
Sir, can you state your name?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Paul Harris.
Thank
I
you.
live in the county. I think too many people oftentimes that have public office sit in a chair. They hear people, but there is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is simply a physical action. Listening is responding to it one way or the other. So thank you for your willingness to sit and your hours off and listen. As I just stated, I live in the county, but I am a property owner in Bellingham. One of the concerns that people both in Bellingham and the county have is in taxation for a new facility, particularly those in Bellingham like myself that own a rental property. The question about was a sales tax proposal a fair one, I would say that it was. If for any other reason, I don't know if it's more than one, but the Bellingham Herald published a study that stated that 50% of the residents in Bellingham, 50% were renters. If that study is accurate, that's not real equitable because the people who are renters are not going to directly be paying property taxes because they don't own any. So a larger burden becomes on those who do own the property to pay that amount, whereas a sales tax is something that everybody pays according to what they purchase. So we have to look at what's going to generate funds, but we also have to look also at what's equitable, what's fair. And a sales tax, everyone will pay a portion of that. And people who travel through Whatcom County or visit and go back, they will be paying sales tax as well. So I think we need to be really careful about just thinking about what the property tax payers are going to do. How about those that do not own property? They all pay a sales tax. I haven't done a great deep study on this, but I think if you look across the country, you'll find that more new construction in jail and prisons is being done horizontally than vertically. If for any other reason, if there is a major disaster in a vertical building, it's harder to get people out than it is with horizontal, where the different pods that they're in can have access to the out of doors immediately. My time is up, I've just been told. Thank you for listening, I appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Paul. Okay, somebody else? Yeah, so ideally somebody who hasn't spoken yet, and then I'm going to allow the council members to see if they have questions that they would like to pose to the group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
Council members, I'm Tim Douglas, 2114 William Street in Bellingham. The topic that we're on tonight is one that I think all of us share, a sense of some grief about because we haven't found solutions, and I'm really pleased to see you making the kind of effort you are to encourage people to comment, to offer ideas, and to help us come up with something that we can more largely get on board with. And I think that's going to be so important. I just wanted to mention a couple of partnerships. I'm on the Board of Trustees at Whatcom Community College. We listen very carefully, as you're doing now, to needs in the community, and heard from those who are dealing with substance abuse and behavioral health. And they said that they really needed assistance with getting people who are adequately trained, additional training that is, and certified so that they could take on positions in this field. We heard it here in Whatcom County, Northwest Washington, and we heard it across the state. So we have begun at Whatcom a program that will certify people moving in those career directions. And we've been getting very beneficial responses. There's a lot of interest in people who want to help provide the resources necessary to make this happen in our community. So I'd like to encourage the council to make sure, as a part of your plan, whatever it ends up being, to reach out, I think particularly to the educational institutions of our area, from K through 12, even preschool, all the way on up through higher education, because there are a lot of people infected by that. We've seen the issues with safety in our schools. I think it's of a major concern to families all over. Not that we've experienced anything yet, maybe to the kind of level that we've seen in other parts of the country, but it is something people care about. And part, I think, of dealing with this question that you've raised is how we can engage families and school districts in supporting better measures to help early identify and intercept youth who may be troubled, and making sure that there are interventions and wraparound services for them and the community so that they don't end just being jail fodder, but instead people whose lives are properly constructed from the earliest possible stage and can evade some of those problems. So again, thank you very much for the work you're doing now, and I'm pleased to see so many comments and ideas offered by the public.
Yeah, all right. You mentioned the training in a field, but I missed what field the training is in. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, for people who already have some training but need to upgrade their skills and their certification in chemical dependence treatment and behavioral health treatment, those two particular fields. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, somebody else who hasn't spoken yet this evening? Okay, council members, do you have any questions you would like to pose? Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add to the training part. I have some experience with the Bellingham Technical College, that there are several programs which are only 3 months long. You can get a certificate like a basic welder, a guy who knows how to do glazing. There are people who can learn really small skills like how to install solar panels, how to do, I mean, I don't want to just read a litany of things, but there are several short-term programs in our community available, but the connection is not there. I remember when I was the dean there, we had several people from the local jail, welding program, and a chef cooking program. I think that's in addition to just learning to get rid of or improve their chemical dependency. There are other skills they can learn, and they can become more productive citizens. They can stand on their own feet then.
Thanks. Did you have a question? Any questions you'd like to ask while you've got the mic? Okay. You just start talking and it kicks on like magic. And that also helps, yeah.
So this is a tough question, and I asked it out in Linden. One of the things the Vera report pointed out is that a community needs to come to grips with who they feel belongs in jail. And and conversely, who doesn't belong in jails really is a bigger question. So we kicked that a little bit around up in Linden. It's a tough question to answer, but we would really like to see if anybody has any views on that.
Would anyone like to come up and speak to that? Yeah, go ahead. And we can have more than one person speaking to a question, right? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for asking the question. That is an incredibly powerful question. My name is Joy Gilfillan, for the record. Over the past few years, 8 in my history, I've been studying on that question, and what I've discerned is that there is a huge difference between prison, where we have convicted violent offenders, or people who have convicted of felonies, and the jail. Over the last 6 months, I've been interviewing and doing case studies on people who have entered the jail system, and what I've discerned is that a huge number of the people who enter the jail in Whatcom County do not truly need to be there. What they need is addiction recovery. What they need is mental health help. They don't need to be entering the jail so they get more mentally ill. What they need is what's called optimal frugal need services. They need a sleeping bag. They need help dealing with the failure of our systems to confuse court issues so that they get pulled back into the jail system. They don't need warrants for arrest that are on technical violations. What we need is we need to help our poor, we need to help our young, we need to help our displaced, we need to help our older women. The number of older women that are dealing with problems inside the jail right now because they have had mental illness that happened because they were triggered by economic failure or by a divorce or other things. These women are going into the jail system. I have 3 of them that we're dealing with right now that have no business going to jail. They've never harmed a single person. They are dealing with mental illness and stress. They are dealing with addiction. They're dealing with smoking pot so that they don't take drugs. In my interviewing of these people, what I have found is that they get arrested oftentimes because they call 911 to get help for their son, or they may have people who call 911 to get help and they get arrested because something went sideways. Did you know that once you are arrested and an incident report is filed, that incident report goes into your NCIC records, and in the future, if you get pulled over for any situation, cops know. If you get accused of a domestic violence, if you get accused of yelling at somebody, that can provoke a domestic violence charge. It can provoke no contact orders. In fighting the situation, people spend $3,000 to $5,000, some $30,000. Some of them have spent $50,000 to try to deal with the Whatcom County system when they were not guilty as charged. That's a problem.
Thank you, Joy. Somebody else to this question? Mm-hmm.
It's Mark Pearson again. That's a great question, and I doubt if we're going to resolve it tonight. So I hope we keep that precise question in front of us from now on, because it's going to be a moving target. As I alluded to in my comments in Linden, I think the only people I can imagine that we ought to keep in jail are incorrigible violent offenders. And of course, we can define violence and offense, but incorrigible is really hard. To say somebody's beyond repair, beyond grace, I don't know how to do that. But those are the only people I can imagine that we should be keeping in jail, because I think, at least in Linden, all the comments there, we all seem to be of one mind that jails, while they may protect the public, they don't do much for the people in the jail. They all get worse. They don't become better citizens in jail. So I just congratulate you for putting probably the most important question in front of us, and let's just keep it there and keep working to find that right answer and try to move where we don't throw people away if there's any chance that we can help them. But we do need to protect people from violent offenders, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll bring up the subject of bail. A lot of times people are stuck in jail because they can't make bail. Again, a lot of these downward spiral things where they, you know, then all of a sudden you got the jail people after you and the bail people after you, and then there's paranoia to these people that are already, you know, challenged as it is. So the whole bail industry, if you really look at it, and I've had an opportunity to do that through the various films that have been available through, I forget what groups put it on, Human Rights, I think it was. But just, it is designed as a moneymaker for someone, and it's really putting the poor people at risk of, and the taxpayers, you know, how much is the bail? And then they sit in there a lot more time, you know, with 3 hots and a cot, eating up the money that, you know, it went beyond what, you know, what the bail was. And it's just, it's a crazy thing, and I think that should, you know, a lot of cities and states are just saying, let's get rid of this industry as bail, because it's taking stock in human stock, and it's not a really pretty thing to exploit people like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else to this question? Or do you want to speak to this question? Mm-hmm. And then we'll go back to you guys.
Yeah, Bob Johnston again. $1,000, $500, $200 for bail, and you can't make it, and then you lose your job because you can't show up. And then you lose your car because you couldn't make the payments. And then you lose your house, and then everything just keeps going downhill. The Vera Institute did bring this up, and people sit in jail because they can't make a small amount of money for bail to get out and get going. That turns into a debtor's prison instead of, you know, justice. And we could probably make a list of a lot of other reasons folks shouldn't have to go to jail: for being poor, for being nonviolent drug users, not a threat to society. Shouldn't go to jail. It's get more complex, but you shouldn't go to jail because of who you are, where you come from, what you look like.
Thank you.
Well, I don't agree that drug users are generally nonviolent, because in some way they do affect the people around them. And it may not be an actual physical sense of violence, but they end up doing all different kind of crimes. And it affects the community. People that should be in jail. Our drug we have a lot of rehab programs, and people get sent to those rehab programs. But invariably what you find is, unless they want help, unless they want to change, those rehab programs don't work. They don't work in the long run, because you can't overcome an enemy that you secretly admire. So a person that's alcoholic, you know, he may say, well, yeah, I'd like to get fixed, but if he doesn't really come to the point where he hates the alcohol and what it does to him, he's not going to change. The same with your drug users. Unless they really come to the point where they hate what it has done to them, what it does to their family, what it does to people around them, they're not going to change. And so we have, and I'm not knocking the programs, but what I'm saying is, if people don't want help, they're not going to get it. And so you've got to do something with those people. I know one woman that she said, I knew that I had to get arrested because that was the only way that I would overcome my drug problem, because I could get away from the people and I could get away from that, you know, environment. And so she was able to overcome, but she wanted help. So she intentionally got arrested. So there's people that, and there are bad people out there that need to be arrested, and they're not going to be rehabilitated. They don't want to be really rehabilitated. And so those are, in the long run, those are the people that usually end up going to prison. But we do have time that, that people, our society is more and more becoming a society where there's no consequence to your actions. And there needs to be consequences. We're a free society, but we abuse our freedom. And if there's no consequences to our abuse, then we're going to keep going down that road and getting worse and worse. So we need to find a way that there's consequences to actions that the society considers improper.
Thank you. And then we'll take one more comment, and then I'm going to allow council members to have another opportunity to ask a question.
Mark Washke, I live out in the county. I have to respond to that. I wasn't really going to speak tonight, but no consequences. I'm going to respond to that. With the amount of people the United States locks up, I think you all know, more than anybody else in the world does, we got way too many consequences and way too many people that really don't need to be there. We also have a little problem with the public defenders being overworked. Personal example, a friend that was kind of pressured to plead guilty so that, because the chance of him getting way worse, and so, you know, that one program I listened to was the school to prison pipeline. No, we have way too many consequences. This has nothing to do with this, but universal health care here. There's some mental help right there. We would have some money, you know, right, to take care of stuff, you know, the mental things. And, you know, perhaps we can do like Spain and just legalize all the drugs, and then you get some care for them. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have some other questions? Questions? Yes?
Yes. My question is that, you know, our tax system, or we talked about sales tax versus property tax, you know, about 150 years ago, or maybe more than that, you know, federal government decided that this is what they will tax and they will do stuff. State governments decided how they will collect money, and they do that. And we had a system of sales tax and property tax only for local funding, means our schools, our county, our roads. Have you guys ever thought, is there another way? Why? Because over the last 100 years, the way we earn our income, the way the whole business, commerce, everything is totally changed. We are not agrarian society. Before that, 70% of the people were related to agriculture. And it was very easy to have a property tax and a sales tax, and the income distribution was pretty even. So you put sales tax, everybody was more equitable. But now it has not stayed equitable. What do you guys think is other means or vehicles we could use in future for next 25, 30, 50 years, looking at what is changing in our society, that there is a better mechanism which is more equitable to all the citizens?
So other funding mechanisms to support what we need to do around criminal justice and public safety and So I heard one suggestion earlier about that was really interesting about the health, what was it, the hospital district? So what we're listening for right now, the question is other ways that haven't maybe been spoken yet or identified yet, other ways to fund our system. That's a question on the table, and if you'd like to use a mic, please.
As I understand it, a hospital district or a health district is just one more property tax. I think it's relatively obvious that we're one of the few states that does not have a state income tax, and some income tax dollars could be devoted to our criminal justice system. A lot fewer dollars than I don't think we're going to have a funding crisis with our criminal justice system if we put justice back into it and don't jail people unnecessarily because they can't make bail. Don't save ourselves $100 a day by putting them in home monitoring after they've been convicted and have less than 365 days to serve if they're not a violent threat to the public. It's absurd to me that that because I can make $1,000 bail, I get out on the next day, and somebody else stays there for 6 weeks waiting to come to trial. So, I mean, that some people, I guess, think that's money into the system, but you know, it's a very antiquated system that needs to be done with. You can't have a city or a county or income tax, but the state can, so you can get behind that. Capital gains taxes are another thing. We have this huge wealth disparity in this country where the top 4 individuals have as much wealth as 50% of the nation, and that's, you know, that's just bizarre. The recent tax breaks went to, the top 1% got 87% of all the dollars in the recent federal tax breaks. That again is absurd, but it's our system, and we do need a state income tax with some of it specifically earmarked to treatment programs for drugs and mental illness.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming.
This is a real interesting question. Joy Gilfillan again for the record. I'm a businesswoman, and one of the things I learned years and years and years ago is that what you don't spend, you don't have to make. What we are doing in this United States, we are incarcerating in jails. We are arresting 11 million people a year in jails. If you fail to get out, you're going to cost the state $75,000 a year just in incarceration cost. They have recently discovered that 11 times that cost is the cost of social complications that accrue to the government system as a result. So that's $75,000 per year if you go and fail into the system. If you stay in the system, you generate over 11 times that in tax revenue for the national government. This is a mind boggler. I mean, it blows the mind completely out of here. Because guess what? In our coalition, we've spent less than $1,500 on taking people out of the system. Some of those people that we have helped with simple emotional intelligence support and intervention support had already cost us taxpayers over $500,000 for being in the system for 20 years, and we got them out of the system. Money is really bizarre. If in Whatcom County we do not spend $1 billion over the next 30 years incarcerating people in a fancy facility and instead spent $10 million on fixing up the current emergency conditions in the jail that somehow we've managed to avoid talking about all tonight. And if we took 50% of the inmates out of the jail who do not need to go there and put a few $1,000s per inmate into mental health recovery, into addiction recovery. We do not have good addiction recovery programs in Whatcom County. That is the single biggest gap we have, and no one's filling it, and no one's talking about it. Isn't that interesting? That is why I get a little passionate when I come up here, because we are dishonoring our children, we are killing our children, we are destroying our society, and we are putting ourselves out of business as a citizenry. We are imploding our entire free enterprise, freedom-loving, patriotic system. We are destroying America through incarceration, and it is multiplying across the country out of bounds. And we, in Whatcom County, right here, right now, could change it if we would change the question. The question is not, how can we build a new jail and fund it? The question is, how can we reduce our population in the jail by 50%, like other leadership cities and states have done across the nation, and gut the system. Philadelphia has done it. In Texas, they've done it. Many people have done it. We can do it too. Let's change the questions.
Thank you. Do you have more questions, council members? Yeah. Councilmember Byrd, surprise. Excellent.
My question is, currently the number of females we have incarcerated is more than kind of that cell pod can handle. And so we have a high number of females per, say, restroom. And at the same time, we're looking at kind of a juvenile detention center that is on the, well, not just restroom, but pod, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. On the top floor of this building, we have a juvenile detention center that was built for 50 people. And that detention center has now gone down to 4, sometimes no people, or no juveniles or youth, and kind of a high of around 9. What are your thoughts about possibly moving the female inmates from the jail into that juvenile youth center where they would have more room and more amenities and it would be more hospitable, and relocating the youth program?
Any thoughts on that?
Great idea.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Mike Kaufman. So what I think I just heard you say was we have a system on the 6th floor that was for 50 juveniles, and something happened in our system to help them and remove them from that system. So that's a right path. That hey, we tried something and look, it worked. We have more facility available to remove some that are in the jail and put them in something we already own that's in a better way. So it's something that worked.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, yeah. So, Joy, I'm going to make a suggestion. No, just sit closer to the front, dear. Then you don't have to walk all the way up and down, right?
Smart person. Thank you. I will do that. Couple of thoughts on that. Very apt observation. Mr. McEachran, a few years ago, on record, said that we have reduced the juvenile incarceration rate by 80%. That's a trend, folks. If we're down to 5, and we were occupied at 50 or even capable of running that, it is only smart to reuse the jail facility. It is only smart also that when women who are nonviolent, who request being transported to the jail number 2, Division Street, that they be allowed to go there. Why are they being forced to stay in jail number 1? That's an issue that has just recently come up to me, and it really disturbs me that nonviolent older women who have never, ever been arrested before are being forced to live in inhumane conditions inside a jail that we're not fixing. 50 spaces upstairs. We could move the sheriff's office out of the basement. The sheriff's facility could, in fact, be operated off the vacant emergency management facility out at the airport. Secondly, we could move the corrections deputies underneath the courthouse, making more space in the jail. If we, in fact, did move nonviolent offenders out of the main jail, we would be able to do a complete remodel of that facility for probably a fraction of the cost, provide more services for the non-violent people, or for the violent people in that facility. You could maybe even hold people in there for severe mental illness or under restraint. Third option, you can take the Division Street property, use it for all your reentry and diversion programs, implement EHM, implement the scram bracelets, do all kinds of things to get people out of the jail. The jail by itself, you'd spend 24 hours in there, the evidence is clear, people get mental illness from going to jail. That's contraindicated, it's expensive, and it doesn't work. Thank you, Tyler, brilliant suggestion.
Great, thank you.
It wasn't my idea. It was Sheriff Elfo's idea that he brought to me and mentioned to me, so.
Great. Great. Okay, other questions from council members?
I do want to know about location. I hear a lot about location, and a lot of people unhappy with the Ferndale as a location. When you consider location, I'm curious, is it something where you feel the jail needs to be downtown Bellingham? Does it need to be in the surrounding area of downtown Bellingham, such as the waterfront? Does it need to be, could it be around the airport, on the fringe of Bellingham, or is it very specific that you feel it needs to be in downtown Bellingham?
Hi, my name's Paul Campbell. I don't have a lot of experience with jails, but in the cities that I've lived in, they've tended to be, they've been located together. And when I talked about that, I probably didn't explain that the idea of having them co-located, the cost of moving people from one building to another, probably via a sky bridge or something like that, as in King County, you know, those costs are quite modest as compared to putting somebody in a van and having several corrections people have to come down with them. And as I say, the congestion is going to increase. It already is starting. I can see it in just a few years that it's been increasing on I-5. So we're going to have much more of that being a problem. And if you're down to the point where the number of inmates allows it, it would be much easier and, as the Department of Justice indicates, much less expensive in terms of continuing operating costs over the life of the building.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Eric Ritchie, Bellingham. I just wanted to say that I use the current jail. I'm a prosecutor. I also use the current video courtroom system, and I don't like it. I think that the county council should consider finding a system or an option that does not include a video courtroom. I personally believe that it dehumanizes both the defendant and the defense attorney for the judge. I don't think they're given a fair shake when using that system. It's just the way I feel about it. I ask you to consider other options.
Great, thank you.
Good question, Tyler. Mark Pearson again. When I look at the system, it seems to me no matter where you place the jail, one way or another, the prosecutors and the sheriffs and the police are going to find a way to get there, no matter where you put it. Actually, when I look at the system, the part that seems the weakest to me is the defense. I want the wherever the jail is and everything else you can do to make it so that defense attorneys are high quality. I'd like the defense attorneys to be better paid and more competent than the prosecutors. I'd like to get the thing going the other direction so that people, poor people in particular, get excellent defense. Rich people get great defense. So wherever you need to place it and whatever else you need to do so that these people have excellent defense attorneys.
Thank you.
Lloyd Zimmerman from Ferndale. I like the idea that it's here in the city limits, you know, the county seat, and also all these ancillary tools and assets that you have, and many of them are unnamed as far as volunteers and different things that are part of the social network that keep people from falling through to that bottom level. I like it here. I think there's things that, I think everything you have to do to fix the problems is here already. And just like that creative comment right there that you brought up, you know, it's kind of a shell game, but, you know, it has to be pliable as a matrix because, you know, populations change, new technologies change, everything changes. So to be flexible and have more of a mall type of thing where, you know, if it's, you know, vertically striated, however it works, but have it more concise here. You know, there's a little bit of Ferndale backlash, and it was kind of kept quiet, but it ain't over. But I like the idea that, you know, we're here, this is where the county seat is, and we're dealing with it because, again, you have the social structure that are part of the solution.
Thank you, Lloyd. I do see a couple other people who haven't spoken yet, so I just really, if you haven't spoken tonight, I'd really encourage you to get a chance to have it. No, it's fine. I'm more just pestering a little bit. Go ahead.
I can't recall all of the details off the top of my head, but I know that a goodly number of properties were looked at, evaluated on a number of criteria, and the one on LaBounty Road stood out from the others as being the most logical choice. The second suggestion I might make, that if there's ever a concern about selling that property for the purpose of which it was purchased, go talk to the Blaine Police Department, talk to the Linden Police Department, talk to Sumas. They have a real encumbrance placed on them when they have to travel from such a distance to the county jail where it's presently located. So we don't want to just think about what's convenient for Bellingham. We want to think about what's convenient, what's appropriate for those men and women serving in those positions as law enforcement officers in the outlying areas. Certainly one could say, well, there's more crime in Bellingham, so we can, you know, not have to drive so far. But when you take a department like Sumas that may only have one officer on at a time, and he's now got to take somebody to the Whatcom County Jail, what does Sumas do? They're stuck. Their town is unprotected, or they have to call somebody maybe that's off duty. So we need to look at just more than Bellingham's needs. We need to look at Whatcom County's needs. And the property on LaBounty, I think, is about as centrally located as what we're going to find. So it may not be the best use of time and money to sell that to go buy something somewhere else. One of the advantages in having space instead of something downtown is that if you, for some unforeseen reason, have to empty a portion of that facility, you can fence that. If you were to have a jail out on LaBounty Road and for some reason a pod or more had to be vacated, there's a fence around the place. Whereas if there's something downtown, where are you going to provide enough parking, and where are you going to be able to put a fence downtown to hold those people if there's some need, particularly a disaster of a fire? I had one man say to me, well, there should be the jail kept downtown. And I said, but what if there's a fire in there and they have to empty that building really fast? Where do those men and women go now? They just walk away because there's no way to confine them for those that need to be confined. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Or yes, please.
Anna from the Columbia neighborhood. And I'm just want to make sure that everybody understands the difference, as Joy pointed out earlier, the difference between a prison and a jail. Because the scary people really should be in prison and not even in the jail for very long. So what we're talking about is a transient population here that our jail will ever deal with to begin with. So we're not talking about storing or housing scary people for long periods of time. We're talking more about a triage unit. I think a jail is more of a triage unit. And compared to a prison is someplace where they're going to go for a long time. But a jail by its very definition, people don't go there very long. That's what prisons are for. So the scope of what we're dealing with on a local level is more like an ER. That's what a jail is. And then to keep people coming back, like at an emergency room, the doctor would need to give the person, the patient, something to, a prescription, something to do. What do they need to do to get better? And I think if we look at jail like that, as opposed to a prison, which is a completely different issue on a state level, that it's a manageable issue for our county. It's not going to be very hard. So I think Dr. Pearson talked about RCW 77, 70, so, oh yeah, okay, 77. Yeah, it's all about health and public safety. And if the county would look at forming a taxable project and think of the jail as more of a triage unit, that might be the better way to look at what a solution could be in the future. We're in the 21st century. We're locking up people who are traumatized is not the way we're going at all. That's just not the way anymore.
Great, thanks.
I think the objections to Ferndale are not because people in Bellingham have anything against Ferndale per se. I think it's because in Bellingham we have all of the ancillary services that are necessary to are necessary for our criminal justice system to work. And it's not just the cost of the Bellingham Police Department ferrying people back and forth from the jail. It's the cost and inconvenience of city attorneys, defense attorneys, the prosecutors moving back and forth. And it just makes sense to me to have it located near to where the ancillary services are. Finally, the poor single cop on duty out in Sumas who catches somebody that needs to be booked into the jail, he's still going to have to leave duty to drive to Ferndale, but there's not going to be the supporting services there for the person who is the accused person. So I personally would like to see the county try to sell that site to see if they can get back the money they paid for it, because there's a lot of speculation that they overpaid for it in the first place.
Thank you.
Joy Gilfillan. I have a litany of reasons for not being in Ferndale. And I would highly recommend that all people on the Whatcom County Council seriously go read the environmental impact statement, November 23rd or whatever it is, 2013, the final one where it includes all the public comments. There was a lot of concern about what's going on. Number one, when you move people and you have to transport violent offenders to the Whatcom County Courthouse for trial, it's a bad idea. That means you're increasing risk, you're increasing cost, you're increasing staffing for being able to transport. Here, you can just run them down an elevator. Two, you will be moving your civic center. When you are moving multiple hundreds of people out of working at the courthouse or working at the jail, and you move those people, all of that commerce, all of their purchasing power moves to Ferndale. The county seat and the balance of power moves to Ferndale. The jurisdictional changes will move to Ferndale. You actually could conceivably be changing the voting districts because the census is taken on the jail when you're occupied in the jail during census time. There are costs that will go up to the inmates. If they have to pay for video conferencing, if they have to pay for all their people, that all is a charge to the inmate that is not charged to the county. The county gets commission on that stuff. When we start looking at the privateering costs to the inmates and the fact that if they get released in the middle of the night, how are they going to get back to town? Are you really wanting to have all the homeless that are transients in the jail? Do you really want them releasing into the county and living in the farms and in the bushes there? That property out there cost us taxpayers $150,000 an acre for 20 acres. Who in the world pays $150,000 an acre on cost basis? I used to sell real estate. I was a real estate broker and a trading contractor, securities trader. Today, if we build on that property, which shouldn't even be on the conversation since the taxpayers voted it down twice, if we have to pay for that and mitigate the wetlands, your cost basis on that property is $500,000 an acre. That's unacceptable.
Thank you, Joy. Barry?
So we've heard a little bit mentioned tonight about the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. I would like to know, if you had the floor in one of their meetings, what would your ideas be for reducing the population in the jail?
Because I was, Paul Campbell, because I was new to Bellingham, although not necessarily to Acme County, or to Whatcom County, I did attend some of those sessions. And I thought, in general, they were very thoughtful. And I heard people searching for the correct answers. And the only thing I wondered was, why was it taking so long in particular, for changes in the prosecutor's attitude when the city of Bellingham had demonstrated some of the changes. Same thing too with respect to, for instance, the units, the monitoring units. City of Bellingham went with relatively low-cost units as compared to what the county went with. Also, my understanding is you have to go out to Division Street to get it, and there's no bus that goes out there, so somebody has to take a cab to get out there, or they're going to spend the night in the jail. You know, I think the trauma center, it's 16 units for, I guess, for alcohol and for for drugs and alcohol, 16 for mental illness. And there didn't seem to be a good rationale for that level, other than that's what the government would pay for. And I wondered too why there weren't more facilities for people with alcohol problems, treatment centers that are available to them. And I didn't know about the fact that there are no counselors in this area for drug abuse. I think, you know, probably that's a good, a good part of what's, you know, the clientele that you have there. And it's, as someone has suggested, it's probably good business to reduce those frequent flyers, as they've been referred to in the medical situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, gentlemen. My name is James Erb. I live in Bellingham. Thank you for that question, Barry. And I think that the answer to that question that I would give is that it's incumbent upon the voters of Whatcom County to elect a new Whatcom County prosecutor and bring real change in the leadership of the county prosecutor's office, and elect somebody who is willing to work with the task force to embrace some of the changes that have been recommended over the last 2.5 years that will safely reduce our jail population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Kaufman, and I think that question possibly speaks to the green information. What information do you think the community needs to make a good decision? And it goes back to maybe the comment I made about the rest of the world seems to do less money and less incarceration. So to make a good decision, what are they doing that's different, and why is our incarceration twice as much or so high? And I think in our society, we have to look to the corporations and to the making of money that is done with incarceration or with our health care and with so many things that are basic human services, or a destruction of our society that corporation is making money on. So there are examples that work in the world, and I would like to see those numbers and why they succeed and why we don't.
Thank you.
You have the answers. The questions have, you're not going to get a new question here tonight that hasn't been raised by the task force. The task force has done a thorough job. I'm glad that you're taking more public input, but do not let public input be an excuse for a lack of action. We have had a lack of action on this for far too long. Make the decisions based on the evidence you already have. It should be pretty simple.
Hello, my name is Heather, and I live in Bellingham, Washington. The question was, what are some ideas for reducing the jail population if we had the floor with the task force, right? I believe that a problem this complex, you have to look at the full spectrum of what's causing it, and we can go all the way upstream to making sure that children are born to healthy mothers that really want them, and that schools are really good, and that we have kids that are getting to full-day kindergarten ready to learn, and that they're graduating from high school and they have opportunity. We need to really look at equity and diversion and make sure people are getting a fair start. We need to try to get people to never even enter the criminal justice system. And then if they do, we need to look at how do we help them re-enter society, and how do we support them? How do we get them job training? And every single individual, there's a different circumstance. Some people need drug addiction treatment. We know that. Some people need mental health treatment. We know that. So it's 100 things that have to work together. There's no one sweeping solution. The one thing that I'm really excited about, and I think there's true potential for, is true diversion. There's an amazing program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. It's social work working with police and prosecution. And I think that the GRACE program is a really great start. And if our prosecutor could help us with the diversion piece and actually hold charges for individuals that qualify, then that would be a really, really tangible thing that we could maybe tackle and help people from even ever entering the system in the first place. So those are my ideas for now. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I just want to make one quick observation about the condition of the jail. I think it's sometimes very easy to say, let's just spend some money, fix it. And it is very complex or expertise question. We want to create services like mental health, people who are in the jail, for drug treatment, behavioral, education. Our current jail does not lend to. All I want to say, we cannot punish our future because of the mistakes of the past. This building has been there for last 30, 40 years. Whatever happened, how it happened, yes, we should analyze, but we cannot say, or since it happened, so we shouldn't look at in future what kind of jail we need. That I have visited the jail a few times. That's my observation.
So it sounds like one of the pieces of information that we need is the jail that is currently existing, is it able to be rehabilitated? And I just want to acknowledge that we've really heard a wide range of opinions on that. So that seems like an important piece of information that we're going to need to really look at, if that's even possible. I also want to just reflect, I was hearing a lot of differences of opinion on, in terms of really that distance. You know, we've had people speak to the value of the La Bounty property, but you know, the cost of the distance people travel. That seems like another thing that people are really curious about. I just want to acknowledge that also we're almost out of time tonight. So I'm going to just look to you, Barry, to ask how much. It's 10 to 9 right now. So do you want to hear a few more comments? Do we have time? Okay. Okay, great. So a couple more folks who'd like to say a few more words, and anybody who hasn't had as many turns, you have not taken your turn. No pressure. Yeah, please, sir.
So to answer your question, Barry, first of all, I see there's a lot of people that are compassionate. And I think that when the system is overloaded, there's no room for compassion. So when you've got people that are trying to, you know, the public defender's got way too many cases, they don't have time to be compassionate. Deputy sheriffs, same way. When I was at, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was a resident deputy in Paradise for 3 years. When I retired, the sheriff brought out some statistics that said that while I was out there, property crime dropped by 70%. Because I spent time with the people, had opportunity to be compassionate, talk with them, get to know them. I knew who the bad guys were, I knew who the good guys were. The bad guys, I actually had them, there was one guy that ran, and they spent the night running from us, got up the next morning, had a good breakfast, and called in and says, "Can Deputy Langley come pick me up?" Because he knew that I would be fair and compassionate. I had the time. So maybe we need some more staffing. Maybe we need some more deputy sheriffs that have the time to spend with the people, like community policing type thing. So that might reduce the crime because they're out there talking to the people. I solved several things, and instead of taking them to jail, the people were interested in getting the stuff that was stolen back. So I made sure they got their stuff back, and they were happy to say, "Okay, we'll call it good." But when you don't have time to do that kind of stuff, then we get a system and you get, you know, in the grind. Just something to consider.
Thank you.
I got angry at the first, and now I'm very happy because I'm actually getting to speak. Thank you for the listening session. And thank you for the question, Barry. First, we need to look at the fact that our average length of stay in the jail went from 9.7 days to 22 days under the past administration of the prosecutor's office. I totally am excited to know that we may have a new prosecutor. The excessive continuances have been 8, 10, 12 months, caused by the prosecutor unwilling to prosecute cases appropriately. Some of it is public defender failure, but some of it is just repetitive prosecutor. Every month that people stay inside their jail, they're further damaged, and their probability of returning to normal life, not in poverty and not with a sentence hanging over their head, is, they're toast. The City of Bellingham, the Lummi Nation, the Nooksack Nation, other organizations have reduced their population by truly implementing the accurate risk assessments, pretrial services, electronic monitoring and SCRAM. City of Bellingham saved $1.5 million recently just by implementing alternatives. That's extraordinary. We can do that. We have resistance from the sheriff's office. Some of it is because of felony. This is felony issues as opposed to misdemeanor issues. I get it. But there are many, many alternatives that can be implemented. One thing we could do is simply change good time back to a third. We're like down to a sixth or something, and they changed, the administration changed the rules for releasing people and how many people could actually qualify for good time. Well, if you reduce good time like they're doing in Yakima, we could take a lot of people out of the jail and reduce the occupancy load. We could put people into community care. We could implement the YO program, the Youth Offenders Program that they implemented in Las Vegas. It was very successful, just like we could implement LEADS, far larger. And many of the programs that we say we have are small. They're signature programs. They're token programs. We could implement them and broaden them dramatically. Drug court is one of the things that could be solved. On my own personal basis, the Restorative Community Coalition is planning a $1 million fundraising campaign to implement and produce the Restorative Community Center, in which we will be doing direct services, we will be doing emotional resilience intervention programs, we will be proposing case management, court mentoring, peer review, apprenticeship programs. We have many solutions that we can bring to the community if we were asked, and I would love to present them. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge what Heather Flaherty brought up. She actually used the word, it's a complex system. And then she did a really nice job of sort of explaining that it has a beginning with mothers and babies and goes all the way through our lifetimes. And then she, sort of said, and there are some programs. But I really want to, every comment that's been made here today makes sense to me. The problem is we need a way in an ongoing fashion to see it as a complex system. So I don't really spend much time these days. I don't practice medicine anymore or even talking about medicine, but I was just thinking about this. I spent, who's counting, but 8 or 10 years, studying for one reason, really. It's because they were trying to stuff into my head a picture, a multidimensional picture of a system called the human body. And I got to tell you, our county is as complicated as the human body, and we need to approach it systematically because the health and well-being of our county and our citizens is at least as important as the physical health of the individuals in it. So I'm not going to say any more now, but I really want this Heather's idea of getting better and better year after year, of understanding the anatomy and physiology of our county and the diseases so we can treat them. It's actually doable. I just got back from Europe meeting with 30 people who do this for a living. I would love to help us become doctors of our own community over the next 5 or 10 years. It's possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to need to wind it up, and I just first I want to start by thanking Marty. I've been watching you type the entire night nonstop. That's a lot of typing, and Genevieve for being on top of that timing. You did that so brilliantly, and our camera person here for just like recording us, and so that we can make it a visible process, and just everybody for coming out tonight and sharing your thoughts and feelings with such heart and grace. I really appreciate it. And then our council members, thank you for making this possible for us to do. I really appreciate your time. So I'll turn it over to you, Barry.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate all your views. And the next session is on Tuesday, the 15th of May, out in Sudden Valley Dance Barn. So if you feel like coming out again, we'd love to see you. And tell your friends. Bob, did you have anything you wanted to say before we leave? Okay. So our committee meeting stands adjourned.